When I first saw this image, I couldn't look at it for more than a few seconds. And apparently, I wasn't the only one. For years, this face has been one of the internet's most recognizable horror images. Millions of people have seen it. At first, it was simply a creepy image spreading around online. But as more people saw it, stories began appearing everywhere. People wanted to know who this person was. Why did he look like that? What happened to him? And over time, one particular story became far more popular than the others. According to that legend, Jeff was just a normal teenager. He lived with his parents and his brother. And after moving into a new neighborhood, both brothers had to start attending a new school. Jeff was quiet, reserved, the kind of person who mostly kept to himself. His brother was different, more outgoing, more confident, and generally better at dealing with people. But shortly after arriving at their new school, the two brothers became targets for a group of bullies. At first, Jeff ignored it. He stayed quiet, avoided conflict, and tried not to react. But one day, things got physical. The bullies started attacking his brother, and that's when Jeff completely snapped. He suddenly became far more aggressive than anyone expected, and seriously injured one of the bullies during the fight. Teachers rushed in before things could get even worse, but by then, the damage had already been done. To protect Jeff, his brother ended up taking responsibility for the incident. And after that, everything changed. Jeff became isolated. The only person he was truly close to was gone. He spent more and more time alone. And according to the story, that loneliness slowly started affecting him. Then came the event that would change everything. Several weeks later, Jeff attended a party, and unfortunately, he ran into the same bullies again. They wanted revenge. A fight broke out almost immediately. Even though Jeff was heavily outnumbered, he kept fighting, as if something inside him had already started changing. During the chaos, one of the bullies was killed. The remaining attackers panicked. In desperation, they threw chemicals and bleach onto Jeff before setting him on fire. Within moments, Jeff collapsed. Everything went black. Nobody knew whether he would survive. Days later, Jeff finally opened his eyes in a hospital bed. His entire face was wrapped in bandages. The doctors had managed to save his life, but the damage was severe. The burns had permanently altered his appearance. His skin had turned unnaturally pale, and many of his facial features were barely recognizable. The medical staff were worried about how he would react once he saw himself. Eventually, they handed Jeff a mirror. Everyone expected the worst, but instead of screaming, Jeff smiled. The room fell silent. The doctors couldn't understand what they were seeing. Rather than being disturbed by his appearance, Jeff seemed fascinated by it. At first, they assumed it was the medication affecting his judgment, but as time passed, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. Something inside Jeff had changed. A few days later, Jeff was discharged from the hospital and allowed to return home. Physically, he was recovering. Mentally, however, nobody knew what was happening inside his head. His parents tried to support him, hoping things would eventually return to normal. But according to the story, Jeff wasn't the same person anymore. He spent most of his time alone in his room. He rarely spoke. And whenever his family looked at him, they felt increasingly uncomfortable. Then one night, everything changed. Jeff sat alone in front of a mirror, staring at his reflection for hours. The more he looked at himself, the more obsessed he became. According to the legend, he began to see his burned face as something beautiful rather than horrifying. And that's when he made a decision. Using a knife, Jeff carved a permanent smile into his cheeks. A smile that would remain on his face forever, but he wasn't finished. The story claims that he burned away his eyelids as well. His reasoning was simple. If he never closed his eyes, he would never stop seeing the face he had become. By the time he was done, Jeff no longer looked human. But from the doorway, his mother had seen everything. She was horrified. Panicked, she rushed to find Jeff's father. The two locked themselves in another room and began discussing what to do next. At first, they hoped there was still a way to help him. According to the story, they eventually reached a decision that no parent should ever have to consider. What they didn't realize was that Jeff had heard every single one. And in that moment, whatever humanity remained inside him finally disappeared. Strange noises echoed through the house. Meanwhile, Jeff's brother had only recently returned home. He suddenly woke up. At first, he couldn't figure out why. The house felt unusually quiet. Confused, he stepped out of his room and looked down the hallway, and that's when he froze. Standing in the darkness was Jeff. His appearance was almost unrecognizable. The pale skin, the unsettling smile, and dark stains covering his clothes. His heart began racing. He wanted to run, but fear had completely taken over. All he could do was stand there. Then Jeff slowly began walking toward him. The closer he got, the more terrified his brother became. Finally, Jeff stopped. Then Jeff tilted his head slightly, and this is what he said.
You're a monster. That's what they say. But I am not a monster. My name is Jeff, and I love blood. And you are filled with it. But not for long. Don't be scared. You won't feel a thing. All you need to do is go to sleep.
According to the legend, Jeff visits those who stay awake late at night, and whenever he finds someone still awake in the darkness, he leans closer and whispers the same two words, "Go to sleep." And that's the complete story of Jeff the Killer. Now obviously, none of this is real. The story has a lot of problems, if you actually think about it. For example, Jeff kills one of the bullies, but somehow he isn't arrested. There are quite a few moments in the story that don't really make much sense, but honestly, the story isn't the reason Jeff the Killer became one of the internet's most famous horror legends. The real reason is that image. That single disturbing photo managed to spread across the internet and become one of the most recognizable horror images ever created. And here's where things get interesting. Unlike the story, nobody has ever been completely certain where that image actually came from. For years, internet users searched forums, old websites, archives, and forgotten corners of the web, trying to find the original source. Some people claimed they had solved the mystery. Others believed the truth had been lost forever. And at one point, there was even a reward offered to anyone who could provide definitive proof of the image's origin. So the question is, where did the Jeff the Killer image really come from? Was it simply an edited photograph? Was it created as part of an old internet prank? Or is the real story even stranger than the creepypasta itself? That's exactly what we're going to investigate in the next video.